tracery of railways once graced Hampshire, Wiltshire and East Dorset. The first opened in 1847 between Southampton and Dorchester. Connections to Lymington, Salisbury and Bath appeared before the coastal route was completed through Bournemouth. Fireman Barry Sullivan recalls the last years of steam.
Yeah, Bournemouth had quite a large allocation. Of a Saturday night, there used to be over 100 engines in there. They weren't all Bournemouth ones, but well, when I first started, there was T9s, bugs as we call them, the old B4s, Qs, we had the West Countries, Merchant Navies. Standards, we had a few, but not that many. King Arthurs, they were gradually being phased out, but the schools were still about. So I did manage to get on quite a variety as a fireman, right? So I wasn't bad at all. There was a lot of drum and tank store about then. There was a push and pull gang, and that's when you've done all your Swanages and your Lymingtons and your old roads. Yeah, I enjoyed that gang, that was all right. We still had the 700s about, the old black motors.
The Drummond 060s had been handling freight in the West Country since 1897. 4 decades later, Maunsell introduced the Q class for the same duties. Wide Lemaitre blast pipes were a bullied innovation. After nationalisation, the standard design soon became familiar on the Southern's byways. The Lymington branch thrived on ferry passengers from Yarmouth on the Isle of Wight. Publicly opened to the town quay in 1858, it veered southwards from the main line through the New Forest. The current main line through Christchurch and Bournemouth was not to feature until 30 years later. When this was completed, the Ringwood line became the old road, with local passenger services terminating in the up platforms at Brockenhurst, seen here on the left. Lymington trains departed from the Down Bay, which the Southern was to convert into a loop when it rebuilt the station. The 3 routes separated at Lymington Junction. Branch trains traversed the open heathland of Setley Plain before approaching woods around St Austin's and the Lymington River. Deep among the trees lurked Ampress Road Halt. Yachts and trellis fencing are made now on the site of Wellworthy's Piston Ring Works, which was a threepenny ride to the town.
Well, it wasn't all that big a place, not Lymington, as regards freight. There was a small yard in Lymington town there. There was 2 roads, I think, was designated for the coal.
From beneath the overall roof of the Victorian terminus, the line curved away to cross the river on a low viaduct. The short extension to Lymington Pier reflected the difficulty of docking at the town jetty, which was tidal. Deeper water at the mouth of the river enabled paddle steamers to berth throughout the day. The London and South Western acquired 2 from the Solent Steam Packet Company shortly after Pier Station opened in 1884. 5 years previously, the LSWR had bought out the Lymington Company, having always worked the line with its own locomotives and stock. Barry Sullivan recalls the black motors as we return to Brockenhurst.
They were flat fire box, and you used to have to put the coal round the edge to get the steam right. But you couldn't never do any speed with them. Same with the Q class. As soon as you got up to about 40, 45 mile an hour, you used to get the old oscillation with the tender, trying to overtake the engine.
placed heavier engines on boat trains to Lymington. Local passengers were treated to new push-pull sets. Minutes were allowed for the journey.
It's only 5 mile. You came out of Brockenhurst, that was uphill to Lymington Junction. Round to the left, still uphill. And another, perhaps mile, you used to shut the regulator and she run right the way down to Lymington then. And down to Lymington town. And it was just a matter of a couple of puffs to go across the water into the ferry terminal. When you were pushing, the push and pull equipment sometimes didn't work, so it had to be disconnected. So the driver didn't know what was happening on the engine, if you like. The fireman used to do the driving as well, and it was done through a bell code.
It was in the driver's interest to alert his fireman 100 yards from the home signal, as required by the working timetable appendices.
Me being me, keen, I used to thump hell out of them. But I always used to like to hear the chatter out the chimney. And we never had any fear of priming because we never had enough water in the boiler for that. That was push and pull M7 tanks. Then they started putting the middling tanks on there.
Keith Sloper, also of Bournemouth Shed, recalls his new charges.
We started getting the standard class or the IBIT class engines, which was suddenly couldn't believe it. We'd gone from the horse and cart age to dead modern transport, you know. He's flying up and down with these tanks. Couldn't believe it, the speed we could get out of things, you know.
Old ways were changing fast. Drop-light open thirds from the southern era complemented driving trailers converted from brake composites on branch duties. Within 4 years, the Maunsels were to be withdrawn in favour of bullied stock, surplus to mainline requirements. Lymington town, its yard well filled with wagons, had its morning rush hour.
The school's train was run for Brockenhurst College normally. You'd run your empty train down to Lymington, run round, back in the yard, stand up for probably half hour, shunt over back into the station. And the platform's black with children and that, and then you get all your pupils in the train and run them up to Brockenhurst.
Bournemouth Shed assisted the local crews.
There was two pair of Lymington men, there were 2 firemen, 2 drivers down there. They used to do most of the work on the branch, but every so often we used to come around the old road into Brockenhurst and then do a couple of trips on the branch while they had a break perhaps, while they'd done the cleaner fire and that, you see.
Rails to the right still serve the town jetty. cater for its end-loading ferries, the Southern built a new slipway to the right of the pier station canopy, which necessitated a level crossing. Closing its gate, setting the signals and receiving the single-line token were the signalman's principal duties until the arrival of the standards and iverts. The new tanks uncoupled and ran round their carriages on each visit to the pier. Unlike the M7s, they were not fitted for push and pull working.
Whereas before, we ran into the platform and sort of the driver got out that end and walked up to the loco, and within about 5-6 minutes we were away again.
Each movement blocked access to the slipway. Becalmed motorists had a splendid view. Lymington's survival was assured. Whitelink built a new terminal using land from the loop.
That was quite a heavy branch line, that one, as regards passengers. Obviously for the ferry to the Isle of Wight. They very often get a lot of parcel stuff and that goes down on the trains now for the ferry, so the ferry people come up to meet the train sometimes, you see.
Third rail electrification and cascaded mainline stock maintain a half-hourly service today, although journey times are scarcely sufficient to take full advantage of a buffet car. The overall roof is gone from Lymington town, and the sidings and loop have no place on the modern railway. Green Marine occupy the yard and Webb's Country Foods the site of the engine shed. In keeping with the character of the town, the station building has recently been attractively refurbished, and the waiting room contains an interesting railway heritage and ferry display. Lymington trains run on their own track alongside the main line to Brockenhurst today, terminating in the Down Bay. Passengers from the Isle of Wight cross the platform for their Wessex Electric to Weymouth, or take advantage of the Virgin cross-country services which thread their way to Manchester and beyond. HSTs now rock the footbridge through which it was possible to peer down the chimneys of passing merchant navies. As a sign of the times, the station yard is now a car park, whilst the goods shed has become a ristorante italiano. The up bay, seen here on the left, is used by stopping trains which shuttle between Brockenhurst and Wareham. Once they would have taken the old road through Ringwood and Wimborne, and their destination would have been Bournemouth West. The old road, or Castleman's Corkscrew, was the main line to Dorchester for 40 years.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of population round that way, funnily enough. You came out of Brockenhurst up to Leamington Junction, and then you turned right there into the forest.
Holmesley was the first stop. Typical of Victorian wayside stations were the short sidings provided on either side of the line. Locals found little custom, as there was no village nearby. The station had been opened to serve Christchurch, 7 miles away. Holmesley lost its patronage when a direct line to the resort was built from Ringwood. Level crossings, each with a keeper on duty, were abundant on the old road. There were half a dozen around Ringwood, an ancient market town prettily situated on the east banks of the Avon. The train shed to the right catered for Christchurch passengers. Beyond the station buildings on the upside was a goods shed and an extensive yard which included gravel sidings. An ironworks and sawmill stood adjacent to the downside in the Edwardian era.
And after going over the river at Ringwood, then you started coming into a little bit of population, not a lot.
Ashley Heath Halt was an essay in Southern Concrete, opened in 1927. The same material was used at the turn of the century for the unusual footbridge at West Moors. Officially for Ferndown, West Moors owed its existence to the Salisbury line, for which it was the junction. As a solicitor in Wimborne Minster, Castleman had foreseen the advantage of the railway's advance. Many of Dorset's roads were impassable in the winter months. Prosperity beckoned. For over a century, his vision prevailed.
There was coal, wood, cement, fertiliser, everything you can think of was carried in those days.
Wimborne welcomed the Dorset Central from Blandford in 1860. Heavy freights were permitted a banker as far as Broadstone, where 4 platform faces connected the original main line via Hamworthy with local services to Poole and Bournemouth. A single line from Corfe-Mullen admitted the Somerset and Dorset in 1886. Barry Sullivan recalls a freight turn on the old road.
We'll start with taking the engine off of Bournemouth Depot. Light engine up to Brockenhurst. Well, probably have to remarshal the freight to make it up before you left. And then away you go round to Ringwood. Probably be the first point of stopping and shunting your train. Drop the loaded off, pick up the empties. Half hour in the cabin, cup of tea. Round a bit further, probably round to Wimborne, get another, drop your loaded off, shunt the yard, another half hour in the cabin, another cup of tea, and then on down to Poole. And Poole would be where you leave it. And then they'd shunt it out there again, and then probably put it on another freight to go elsewhere up to Eastleigh. But then you'd probably do the same going back the other way then. Take another freight, perhaps from Poole, straight round to Brockenhurst without stopping, and then dump it at Brockenhurst, and that would go on up to Eastleigh later on.
Rebuilt bullieds were familiar visitors.
One turn used to start from Swanage, and that used to go round the old road and go on up to Waterloo. Sometimes they came up from Weymouth and went that way, up through to Waterloo. Some troop trains from Wool, they went round that way, just to keep them clear of the main line. You see, it was a better route, keep them clear of the main line. Didn't used to get so much coming say from the north, if you like, go round that way, they usually came down the main. But stuff coming from the west to the north, yeah, some went round that way.
Standards were more usual on the locals. Pacifics on M7 duties signalled the end of the Drummonds. The old road was kept in fine fettle, although it had been a secondary route for 70 years.
Well, an old track in those days was maintained good, because you had all your gangs, work your individual little bit of limelight, and they were proud of what, you know, they kept it at.
The loss of Somerset and Dorset traffic after the opening of the Corfe-Mullen cut-off reduced activity at Wimborne, though the down yard was extensive. Grain and feed stores straddled the goods shed, and beyond the former Dorset Central Bay stood a fan of lengthy sidings. As access was restricted by the river bridge, brisk shunting was appreciated by the signalman. On the upside, cattle pens faced West Moors. In latter years, Westmoor saw considerable housing development. Military traffic was generated by the fuel dump beyond the junction signals for Salisbury. Ashley Heath had no facilities for up freights. Traffic for the single sidings circulated via Ringwood and was shunted by down goods trains using an Annette's key. At Ringwood, the Christchurch branch via Herne had been a casualty of the mid-30s. Local passenger services called daily at their summer peak, taking an hour and 10 minutes over the 31 miles between Bournemouth West and Brockenhurst. Ominously, a scrap metal dealer had appeared among the trades served by Ringwood's goods yard. The rise of popular motoring served notice on steam locomotives barely a decade old. The old road closed to passengers in May 1964, though freight continued.
Everything was overgrown. Wimborne is where you generally stop for a break. It was as dead as a doornail around there.
Ringwood lost its rails in 1967. 30 years on, the site of Ashley Heath Halt is barely recognisable. Freight services were progressively truncated, first to West Moors and then finally to Wimborne, which closed in 1977. Dorset's first main line had been a long time dying. Outmanoeuvred in the Victorian era by a coastal route both convenient for Bournemouth and quicker for through traffic, it was little lamented, as Barry Sullivan relates.
Being younger, it didn't register like it would do now. You just took it in your stride, I suppose. But if it happened now, well then you sort of worry a little bit. But in those days, being young and silly, I suppose, you didn't think much about it. Not as a fireman, anyway.
The Southampton and Dorchester became a new road. The Avon Valley was no luckier. That the Salisbury and Dorset would never cover its operating costs was apparent to the LSWR in 1866, who only agreed to work and maintain it to protect territory. Diverging from the Eastleigh line at Alderbury Junction, trains ran southward to West Moors, where they joined the old road. The junction faced Wimborne. In BR days, light Pacifics were permitted, although freight was more often entrusted to 060s.
Had a turn with a black motor from Hamworthy. We used to work that up to Burwood or Borden Bridge and change over with the Salisbury men, bringing another freight the other way.
4 sidings and a crane were available at Verwood, which was approached on a gradient of 1 in 100.
But it was all sort of up and down dale, so with a loose coupled train you got plenty of snatches if you didn't know what you was up to.
The signal box could be switched in to allow trains to pass using Tyres number 6 apparatus.
All single line up there, with all tablet working.
Through the bridge lay Dagon's Road, which only ever had 1 platform. It could be difficult to locate.
In the night time there, it was just one little paraffin lamp on the platform, so if you miss that, you had it, like you.
A private brickwork siding curved away behind the station building. The loop on the downside assisted shunting only, as Dagon's Road was never a block post. When Verwood was switched out, a miniature staff authorised train movements on this section. Fordingbridge was the principal intermediate station. The loop extended well beyond the platforms. 5 sidings, including the customary cattle pens and coal bins, were provided. According to the Salisbury and South Wilts Gazette, the yard rarely contained fewer than 60 wagons and required an hour's shunting daily. Neves had a baby food factory nearby with an appetite for tin plate, whilst local nurseries generated 16 trucks of tomatoes a week in season. Bremer was more typical, with a single siding serving a dairy. Trains often crossed here, down trains arriving up to 7 minutes before their Salisbury-bound counterparts. After the abolition of the signal box for a lever frame on the up platform, the station could be operated by 1 man. Downton's senior porter, Mr. Hopper, released racing pigeons in his spare time. The loop had been downgraded to a siding shortly before the Southern took charge.
And there was also a single bore tunnel up there at Downton. And there you had to have the fire hall door shut, otherwise you get the flames come back into the cab at you.
At Alderbury Junction, the single line token was surrendered. Freight continued to Milford goods.
So it was quite a heavy little road, because we used to go up there with quite some heavy freight site. And of course the old black motors, they used to chonk along. Nice and steady. Yeah.
From Salisbury Tunnel Box, it was a short run into the bay, accessed by number 39 points from the down-through road. Our journey begins at the southern end of the Salisbury and Dorset.
Used to turn off at Westmore's, turn off left if you come from the Bournemouth direction. And then that was countryside right the way through. There was, well, you hardly saw any building at all. Wheat you used to see through there, what the farmers used to grow. That was all country through there.
According to the Ordnance Survey, Charing Cross and Ashford were nearby. However, Dagon's Road was a far cry from Dover Marine. Prior to electrification, City of Wells had been a regular on the Golden Arrow. In the Avon Valley, schedules were leisurely.
Yeah, about an hour and a quarter. By the time you stopped everywhere, like.
At Fordingbridge, marshalling had to take place between passing trains. There was no head shunt for the yard. Maunsell moguls worked turnabout with BR standards. Surprisingly, for a lightly loaded line, push and pull sets did not prevail.
No, they were normal local hauled stock up through there.
LSWR details remained to the end. Salisbury hosted 3 generations of Southern steam.
Once you got into Salisbury, it was in the shed, and turn your engine, water, clean the fire, and then work a return service down to Bournemouth.
Drummond tanks consorted with Hughes and Light Pacifics.
If you had a good one, you could fill the firebox up and sit down and watch the signals on the road light. But they were definitely master of their work. Yeah, definitely. They were very fast, especially the unconverted. You could You get them up to 85 mile an hour and ease the regulator right down, so you just add a little bit of steam on the cylinders, and they go on at 85 for mile after mile after mile. Good machines they were.
The Bulleads were joined by Western warships in the winter of 1964, the year the Salisbury and Dorset closed. The bay was retained. As we returned through Downton, passing the River Avon and the remains of Bremer, Barry Sullivan reflects on the satisfactions of southern engine men.
With a steam engine, it was always a challenge there. And if you picked up a loco that you knew full well wasn't tip-top, and you'd done your job, you got to your destination on time, it was a sense of achievement. The diesels and the electrics just open the handle. If it goes, it goes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's nothing you can do. But with a steam engine, you made it go. As I say, if you could master the engine, it was a sense of achievement. You thought, well, made a good job of that.
The Somerset and Dorset left the old road at Broadstone, as fireman Bill Harford recalls.
Well, it was a branch line, we know. Well, they called it a branch line, but to me it was a feeder line to the north. It was busier, I think, than Bournemouth Central, because from about 5 o'clock in the morning, the trains used to start rolling in from the north. If you can pick a town in the Midlands and north of England, one of them came over the S&D. You know, places that I, as a young lad then, had hardly ever heard. You know, Cleethorpes and Nottingham and everywhere they were coming from. A train, not just, you know, the train hadn't just caught there. It started from Cleethorpes. When they used to have wake weeks, I think they used to call them, when the whole town shut up and the coal mines had closed down and the factories had closed down, and they used to have all these trains, and they used to leave overnight for the south coast for their holiday, and they were packed solid coming down.
Passenger comforts were few.
Well, on those trains they never had buffet cars and restaurant cars. It was just 12 coaches for people to sit in, and that was it. The only trains that had the buffet cars was like the Pines and that.
The Corfmullen cut-off had long superseded the need for reversal at Wimborne. The Dorset Central's main line became the overgrown Carter's siding.
7-something in the morning, the first one used to leave on a Saturday morning going north. And then they were regular then, you know. You wondered how they ever got them in to go over a single line track like they were. They were leaving virtually 10 minutes behind one another. But they always to go like clockwork.
The working partnership between the LMS and Southern was continued after nationalisation. As we pass on to the double track through the Stour Valley, Bill Harford recalls nocturnal milk workings.
Temblecoombe Upper, they put it on the back so that when you got the engine on and they pulled you down to the lower, it'd be on the engine then. For when you got to Bailey Gate, you'd have done up the 2 or 3 milk tanks and then shunt them down and put them in the milk factory for them at night. We used to do that quite regular, especially on a Saturday.
Seasonal freight passed through.
certain times of the year, you used to get cider apples come in at Hamworthy, and they were heavy trains. I don't know where it came from, whether they come from France, and they used to go to Hereford and places like that for cider making. They used to load them in open wagons. When you used to have the train of them, they were heavy.
Branksome men were versatile.
Well, we used to work the passenger up, and we got a Bailey gate. The freight would come down, swap over there, and we used to they used to have a load of stuff for Bailey gate to go in the ordinary sidings for unloading, or it would be in the milk factory. But we always used to have the shunt the milk factory, but they never used to put the tanks on that train. They used to come down in the afternoon on a special train. But we used to have to go up in there, and if there were empty ones, you know, we'd bring them out, and because they could only unload so many at a time, so you used to have to shunt the tanks itself. In the early days, they reckoned that you could go in there and they give you a drink of milk and everything. And they started doing a lot of the whey in these barrels as well, and they used to put them in wagons and take them away. But they used to have a huge field there, and they used to put the whey in the barrels and sort of store them in the field right next to the factory. I suppose that's what's left over after they made the cheese, because they used to make a lot of cheese in there. You could see them making the cheese, you know, but they never used to give you none.
Standard classes worked alongside the 4Fs.
The Armstrongs, which was the 060s, I mean, they had a smaller wheel, and they were ideal for the freight. Shunting boys in the yard and pulling the freight trains, heavy freight trains over the Mendips. That's what they were built for. I mean, some of them were built specifically for the S&D. They were good steaming engine, and they were powerful engines. And in the summertime, when you got them on a passenger service, you could still time the train with them. I mean, they used to rattle and bang, but at least you knew they was going to get there, you know, keep going.
The S&D followed the Stour Gap past Charlton Marshall. Built for high route availability, the smaller standard classes had attractive efforts similar to the 4Fs. Their advantage lay in easier maintenance, outside cylinders and valve gear. Leading wheels also reduced tyre wear. Local traffic was falling out of favour.
A firm called Blanford and Webb's used to have a big shed there, and they used to have to shunt the shed with animal feed, fertilizers. They used to do all agricultural stuff. And at certain times of the year, you'd have a whole train, 30, 40 wagons of fertilizer coming in bags, all bagged up in these box wagons. One of the shunters at Blanford, Ginger, he knew the owner and all that of Blanford and Webb's, and they had a letter from the old British Rail saying that they could still have their fertilizer, but they would have to go to Poole to collect them. The trouble was that, like this chap said, if he was going to do that, he'd just as well buy lorries and go to Avonmouth and collect it.
Single line working resumed. The S&D was known for characters.
Muggins Brewer he was a case. He was good to me. I mean, I used to go fishing with him. He used to have a few tales to tell, you know, when he said there was this rabbit sitting on the bank, he said, and a pike. He said, he see these big pike jump out the river and grab this rabbit and took it back in. He said, but it was all right. He said, because I caught him. He said, and we had rabbit and pike pie. Yeah, I mean, rubbish. And he said, some of these people used to swallow it. And I used to think, oh, he must have gone to a different river than me, Bertie boy.
Branksome men had strong preferences.
Well, you know much about the old Black Fives. I mean, they were, to me, they were the best engines that I ever worked on. Go anywhere, do anything. You know, the old sayings that if they wanted an engine to go anywhere, just pick a Black Five and it'd go there. The standard Fives, they weren't on a par with a Stanier Black, but they weren't far off, I would say. With the Fives, you could fire them similar to you did the Staniers. You know, you could have a nice big fire in them, but the other ones you wanted light fire. The 76s were, I suppose, were a better one than the 75s, but even them seemed a bit too small. I think they would have been better off. They built a few more 73s and done away with that.
Boundary changes added variety to the familiar cavalcade of locomotives and stock.
On a Saturday when they utilised even a 7 freight engine for the passenger trains, and then you had a rock and roll. Of course, they came into their own when they got into the Mendips, because they flew up over there with 8 or 9 coaches on as though they didn't have anything behind them. That's where their beauty was.
Like the southern main line beyond Salisbury, the Somerset and Dorset was transferred to the western region from Shillingstone, where a loop provided a passing place on the single line. The fireman's job was not all hard labour.
You were learning the road, you were helping the driver, you were keeping an eye out all the time, so you could have a look around. People shouldn't get the idea that you picked the shovel up at Bournemouth and put it down at Bath, because you didn't. You knew that your fire was made up ready when you left Bournemouth, and you'd fire accordingly. If you did, you want about 3 tenderfuls of coal, wouldn't you? It was your job to keep the boiler full up so that the driver didn't have to worry about anything. And if you had a good fireman, that's all you had to concentrate on as a driver, just driving the train and keeping an eye out for the signals, because you knew that your fireman would be doing the same for you at certain places.
The next crossing point was Sturminster Newton.
And you got to know the road so well that the fireman would know where he had to look out. And you used to have to remember that as soon as you went by the distance signal, you had to be ready to put the tablet out. You had to keep all these things in your mind. But
From Sturminster Newton, the line entered the Blackmore Vale, passing through Stolbridge and over the county boundary into Somerset. Single line working had its hazards.
you had the automatic catcher, change his tablet, put that out. I mean, the health and safety would never allow it today. You used to have to hang out the side with a tablet in one hand, hold on to the other hand, and you were still rattling along about 75 mile an hour, and put the tablet in and then wait for it to change over, hoping that you were going to catch it. Because if you didn't, you were about a mile down the track and had to walk back, you know, to meet the signalman coming the other way with the tablet in his hand if he found it. Because sometimes when you hit it, it would go anywhere, you know, and if he wasn't watching it, it'd take him 5 or 10 minutes to look for it. I do believe there's a story that once it bounced and they never found it, and it was found about 3 weeks later in a wagon somewhere, you know, way up north.
The prevailing gradient was uphill from Stallbridge. Down trains hurried through Henstridge to clear the section. To the north lay Temple Combe Junction. Somerset and Dorset tradition went deeper than a coat of paint, as Keith Sloper recalls.
We were a book connection with an up Exeter Waterloo train, and we would run in about 2 minutes later, and would come the Exeter train, and all the passengers that we'd picked up from Blandford upwards, they would be able to catch a train to London or Salisbury or wherever they were going. Anyway, all of a sudden they brought the warships in on the West of England line, you know, and they retimed it to be a couple of minutes earlier. So then that meant we wouldn't be a book connection. So what the local railwayman, the Somerset and Dorset railwayman would do, we would go a bit faster and get to Temple Combe Junction. The signalman would be a bit quick. You have the banker on you whip into the station, and you just make the connection. So that went on for a little while. And all of a sudden, the powers that be at Swindon suddenly realised what was going on. They were still getting through passengers from Blandford and, you know, Sturminster Newton and what have you. that they suddenly issued a directive to the man at Templecombe Junction that on no account does this train from Bournemouth be in the platform before the up extra had left, which to me was typical of how the Western Medium was trying to get rid of the West of England main line.
Templecombe lost its connections and its station, though it was reinstated in 1983 by popular demand. The West of England line, reduced to a single track, maintains a high-speed service. The Somerset and Dorset went for scrap, its cuttings infilled, its stations acceptable sites for industrial development.
In 1967, I was a driver at Eastleigh, and they were taking up the S&D then, like at Shillingstone and all that, and they were loading it on wagons and sort of gradually heading south, taking it up. And that was quite a sad day, really. I had to go to Blandford with a Crompton and pick up a load of rails and stuff that they loaded up, you know, and take it up to Eastleigh. That was the last time I ever went up on the S&D.
Keith Sloper captures the atmosphere.
Roll into a station, that would come the signalman and have a yarn about his onions or his potatoes, and you know, so talk about a bit of gardening. You know, it's incredible over there. It was more of a family than what, you know, although at Bournemouth I think we were a family in lots of ways, but over there I think it was a real family, you know. And but you get down through Sturminster and all along there, Sturminster, Newton, you follow the river down, like, you know, it's always sort of a pleasant sort of area. You know, so you think, oh, I think they're paying us to do this, you know.
Holiday peaks and through workings notwithstanding, the 60s saw the old road and its connections severed. Only enthusiasts remember Wimborne.